The river carried the kind of hush that feels older than language, a slow-moving ribbon of sky spilled across the earth. Morning light sifted through the cottonwoods, turning their leaves into tiny coins that shivered in the breeze. The cowboy had been riding since before dawn, chasing nothing in particular, only the long quiet that men sometimes seek when they don't want to face whatever waits back in town. His horse snorted softly, hooves sinking into the soft bank as they descended toward the water for a drink. He wasn't expecting to see anyone there. This stretch of river was usually empty, except for deer and the occasional bobcat that moved like a ghost through the reeds. But as he rounded a bend, he caught the flicker of movement, gentle at first, like fabric breathing in wind. Then he saw her, an Apache woman, kneeling at the water's edge, her back straight as an arrow shaft. She worked with steady hands, scrubbing a strip of cloth against a smooth rock. The river washed over her wrists, glinting around her fingers as if grateful for her touch. Her long braid trailed over one shoulder, dark and heavy, catching the sun in ways that made the strands seem alive. She hummed under her breath, something small, perhaps a melody borrowed from childhood, the kind that anchors a person when the world feels sharp. The cowboy pulled on his reins out of instinct. Not fear, more like reverence. The scene felt private, almost sacred, as though he'd stumbled upon someone speaking to the land itself. He stayed still, trying not to disturb the moment. But then the breeze shifted, and he saw it clearly. Her dress was torn nearly to ribbons. Not the soft tearing from brush or the everyday fraying of a garment worked too hard. These were sharp, uneven slashes, cut through fabric as though by anger or fear or desperate hands. The threads dangled in the wind like silent testimony. He felt the air tighten around him, a low, invisible pressure that made his chest stiffen. He knew the look of trouble when it left its fingerprints behind. Yet she moved with calm concentration, rinsing the cloth, squeezing the water out, laying it across a sun-warmed stone. She didn't touch the damaged dress she still wore. She didn't fuss with it or try to hide it. That alone told him something about her. Whatever had happened, she carried herself with a quiet resolve that kept her spine straight, as if refusing to show weakness even to the river. He watched her for another breath. And another. She still hadn't seen him. His horse shifted, impatient for water, and he stroked its neck to steady it. He wasn't sure whether to announce himself or retreat. The land here belonged to her people, and he didn't want to intrude, yet something in those torn seams felt like an unanswered question pulling him forward. A small ache curled behind his ribs, human concern, uninvited but stubborn. Sunlight drifted across the water, catching her face in broken reflections. She looked young, but not fragile, eyes sharp, jaw set with the grit of someone who has learned to live without expecting kindness. The cowboy felt a strange stillness settle over him, as if the entire canyon were watching through him, waiting to see what he would do. The cottonwoods rustled their faint silver applause, and even the river seemed to listen, its surface quivering with secrets just beneath the skin. A twig surrendered beneath his boot with a crisp little crack, a sound too small to matter in most places but loud enough here to declare him. The Apache woman's head snapped toward him with the precision of a hawk catching motion on the horizon. Her gaze locked onto his, steady and unflinching, and in that instant the riverbank felt like a narrow room with no doors. Her eyes held a guarded fire, the kind that spoke of long memories and short patience for strangers who arrived uninvited. She rose from her kneeling position in one smooth motion, water trailing from the frayed hem of her dress like silver threads pulled loose from a tapestry. One hand drifted, almost lazily, almost politely, toward the knife tucked at her waist, hidden earlier by the drape of fabric. There was nothing frantic about her stance. She wasn't afraid of him, only prepared. She stood as if bracing herself against a storm that had taken human shape. The cowboy lifted both hands slowly, palms open, the universal gesture for a man who wanted no quarrel. "I ain't here to trouble you," he said. The words left his mouth in a low, even drawl, like a creek easing around stones. His voice didn't tremble, but the canyon seemed to lean in at the edges, testing the weight of his honesty. She didn't reply at once. Her eyes roamed over him, not with curiosity but evaluation. His boots, dusty from miles. His coat, worn but mended carefully. His face, sun-chiseled and shadowed by fatigue. She looked for lies the way a tracker reads footprints. After a long, quiet breath, she answered, then right on. The words were simple, shaped clean as polished bone, but they carried an unspoken command, an older authority than anything printed on maps or treaties. Her chin lifted slightly, a small defiance against letting him see the flicker of unease that betrayed itself only in her breath, quickening for half a heartbeat before she wrestled it back under control. But the cowboy had spent years reading landscapes more subtle than this. He saw the way her fingers tightened around the cloth she'd been washing, how she shifted her weight as if unsure whether she should stand her ground or slip deeper into the trees. She held herself with the strength of someone who could fight if needed, but who had already fought too recently. The river kept whispering between them, a soft, steady murmur that sounded almost like a question. Why was a woman alone in a torn dress at the edge of wilderness where dangers wandered freely? Even the cottonwoods seemed restless, brushing their leaves together as though urging someone, either of them, to speak what hovered unsaid. He stayed exactly where he was, making no move closer, no gesture that might sharpen the tension. But he didn't turn away either. Something about her stance, rigid yet quivering beneath its own weight, made leaving feel like betrayal, as though he were walking out on a story half told. Still, he waited for her to decide whether he was threat, witness, or something in between. And for a moment, between the river's hum and the wary rise of her breath, the world held its balance in a single, fragile pause. He didn't move at first, only narrowed his eyes as the light shifted enough to reveal the truth in the fabric draped around her. The cuts weren't random. They had direction, anger, purpose behind them. Not a tumble through brambles, not wear from long travel. These were the kind of slashes that turned a dress into a warning. He stepped forward just enough to speak without raising his voice. Those tears, they ain't from the riverbank. It wasn't an accusation, more like a quiet recognition, a man tracing the shape of trouble by its shadow. Her jaw tightened. For a heartbeat she looked over his shoulder, scanning the tree line, as if expecting something, or someone, to emerge from the brush at any moment. The steady courage she had worn so effortlessly wavered, not enough to crumble but enough to reveal its seams. When she looked back at him, her expression was carved from stone that had endured too many winters. "Men," she said simply. The word came out raw, stripped of all unnecessary detail. "They think a woman walking alone is prey." He felt something tighten behind his ribs, a familiar ember that flared when the world showed him one of its bruises. His hand drifted toward his belt, not to draw a weapon, only to ground himself. He hated the kind of men who carved fear into others and strutted away proud of it. Out here in the quiet country, cruelty traveled farther than footprints. It lingered. "Are they still nearby?" he asked, his voice turning low, as if too much volume might shatter whatever fragile moment of safety she'd carved out beside the river. She hesitated. Her lashes dipped, not in softness but in calculation. Just enough time passed for the river to lap twice against the bank before she gave a short nod. Not fearful, just factual. Her honesty carried the weight of someone who'd had every reason to lie but chose not to. The canyon seemed to tighten its hold around them. Even the sun dimmed a fraction, sliding behind a passing cloud as though giving space to the tension that thickened the air. She adjusted her stance, one foot shifting back, not running, never that, but anchoring herself in case the world decided to tilt again. "I left them behind," she said. "But men like that, they follow. They think the land belongs to them. Think everything on it does." Her fingers brushed the torn edge of her dress, almost absent-mindedly, as though she were touching a bruise rather than cloth. There was no self-pity in the gesture, only frustration, the kind that smolders quietly behind the teeth. For a moment, the morning light caught the stubborn line of her profile, and the cowboy felt an ache like a slow bruise spreading under his ribs. He took another breath, tasting dust, river-cool air, and something sharper, responsibility, maybe, or the echo of every wrong thing he'd ever turned away from. "If they come back this way," he murmured, "I reckon they won't walk so proud the second time." Her eyes flicked to his, unreadable. The river hummed between them, carrying the scent of silt and distant rain. She didn't thank him, didn't soften, she simply studied him, searching for the hidden edges of his promise, weighing whether he was another threat wearing a polite face. The canyon held its breath around them, and the morning seemed to lean in, curious about what shape their next words might take. He swung down from his horse with the slow, deliberate calm of someone approaching a startled wild creature, not out of pity, but respect. Dust puffed at his boots, rising like a muted signal in the still air. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a spare bedroll, its canvas worn soft by countless nights under open sky. Unrolling it slightly, he held it out toward her, both hands visible, shoulders loosened in a gesture that asked nothing and demanded even less. "Take this," he said. "Ain't fancy, but it'll cover you till you got something better." His voice carried no heroic shine, no expectation of gratitude. Just a steady offering laid between two strangers who suddenly shared more tension than most friends ever did. She didn't reach for it. Not yet. Her gaze flicked from the bundle to his face, assessing every ounce of intention, every invisible seam where danger might hide. Trust, for her, wasn't a doorway, it was a fortress wall with only one gate, and even that stayed barred most days. The river murmured around her feet, urging nothing, simply bearing witness. The cowboy let the silence stretch, unbothered. He knew better than to rush someone who'd seen too many rushed hands turn violent. The wind tugged at the torn fringe of her dress, lifting the ruined edges like petals from a wilted flower forced to bloom in the wrong season. She finally exhaled a slow, controlled breath, as though letting it out cost her something. When she stepped closer, it was only a single pace, but it carried the weight of a decision. Her fingers brushed the canvas as she took the bedroll, and in that brief contact something passed between them, neither soft nor sentimental. More like an unspoken recognition that the world didn't often hand out allies, but sometimes it surprised you with one anyway. "My tribe is north," she said. Her voice was steadier now, though still edged with iron. "If those men follow, they'll find me there, not alone." He nodded once, tipping his hat in a gesture as old as dust. "North it is. I'll see you through the first stretch." He didn't make it sound noble, he simply said it like a man stating a direction on a map. Her eyes narrowed, not distrustful this time, but curious, as if she were trying to chart the terrain of his motives. She didn't thank him, words felt too small for the moment. Instead she adjusted the bedroll under her arm and stepped back from the river, the morning light fanning out behind her like a quiet promise that the day wasn't finished with either of them. The cottonwoods rustled above, scattering specks of gold across the river's skin. The canyon wind shifted course, brushing past both of them as though nudging them forward, weaving their paths together in a way neither had planned.